The Healthcare Security Cast is sponsored by 3D Network Technology. Reliability is our core value. Visit www.3dnetworktechnology.com. And by Genetec. Genetec, delivering security strategies for healthcare. Visit Genetec, that's GENETEC.com.
Welcome to the Healthcare Security Cast, the podcast dedicated to healthcare security, safety, and emergency management. If you are involved with a healthcare security program or desire to be, this podcast is for you. Join the conversation as we discuss the issues that matter to healthcare security professionals while leveraging the expertise of healthcare security thought leaders and experts in personal development. And now, here's your host, Brian Hamilton.
Welcome to the Healthcare Security Cast for Friday, July the 10th, 2020. On today's show, we're joined by leadership expert Tony DaDante for part one of a two-part series. In part one, Tony will share his story and some of his unique insights into leadership. Let's jump right into the show. Tony, thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Absolutely.
All right, and I always like to start off by learning a little bit about our guest. So can you tell us, who was Tony DaDante?
Well, Tony DaDante is a Renaissance man. He's one of these guys that sort of been there, sort of attempted everything I ever wanted to attempt, and an all-in sort of person. I'm a New Yorker. I lost my parents really early. I've been on my own. I grew up in gangs and then in athletics. Thank God I was a good athlete. And otherwise, we'd be having this discussion from the other side of a prison cell. But with all that being said, I learned very, very early about leadership, and I learned about resiliency and all these new words that people are throwing around with the new COVID and all that stuff. And so today I'm going to share with you my take on all of this, which is significantly different than what anybody has heard. But I'm so confident about it because I've lived it. I'm going to share it. And then I feel blessed to be on this call with you because I do have a pretty significant security background from all my corporate jobs, always heading up security in the corporate. I worked for great big brands, Harley Davidson, Hewlett Packard, Mattel Toys, General Motors, and all of them had a large security piece to it. And then in my consulting world, I've done a lot of consulting work with BP Oil and Allied Barton, I guess is who it is now in your world. So I got some very high level executives that I coach at Allied Barton who did work with me when I was at BP, fixing a part of their culture, and they have just risen to the top of that company. So I'm not going to give that all to me, but there is a prize at the end for all the work. And then from a security standpoint, who am I? I'm a martial artist for the last 35 years. I bodyguard, not as much anymore, but I do a lot of work with the special forces. I train people for special missions. One of the only lay people to do that stuff. So they must think I'm pretty good at what I do. But I'm involved in the security area because I train nurses. And this is something in your field, and I'm not sure how it is in Canada, so just fill me in on it. But at least in the States, some of the highest amount of physical abuse and crime happens to nurses. And it goes under the radar. So especially in Florida, I train nurses on how to use, I get them their concealed carry license. I teach them how to use force multipliers. I teach them situational awareness. I teach them how to use, first of all, try to avoid an ambush, try to read an ambush coming. But if it comes, I teach those 110-pound women how to get in and out real quick and win. And so I have lots of nurses around the country that I've been doing this work below the radar screen. There's some badasses now.
Nice. No, it's definitely the same in Canada. We do have I think it's just globally. We have an issue with violence in the healthcare environment, and some things like underreporting tends to be something that we're trying to focus on now, because we're just seeing a lot of people are accepting the violence as part of their job, and it really shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, and I've worked with security operators who question whether that is part of their role. So, get involved with that sort of group discussions with security guards and security executives that are sort of trying to redefine the role of a security person. Where do they get involved as opposed to where do the local law enforcement? We're trying to get some, in the meetings I hold with people around the world, it's around clarity of role, clarity of responsibilities, and also clarity of interdependencies, upstream and downstream. Who has what responsibility at certain levels? And so it's pretty exciting work, and I think we'll have a good time tonight. I think I can shed some light on some stuff.
Excellent. Now, your work these days essentially revolves around leadership and helping leaders be successful, especially new leaders. Can you walk us through your career, and just so we have an understanding of what led to you being where you are today?
So decided early on found out I was a really good athlete, tried to be a pro football player, had the strength. I don't think I had the speed, but I was really strong. Anyway, so I tried to do that. That got me through college. And my first job out of college was at General Motors. And I tell you this story because I'm a street kid. So even though I was an average student in undergrad, when I went for my master's and PhD, I had to learn how to be a superior student just to compete. And at GM, we went away for a week in an assessment center, and there was 143 job openings. And at that time, GM was having trouble working with the UAW. And you have the UAW in Canada, right? So CAW, I think it is. So, and they're a pretty strong union. There's no doubt about it. They carry a lot of weight. So GM back then, in their grand wisdom, thought that they're going to put 143 junior military officers in there to control the UAW. And I was the one test case that came from the street. And so they put us through a week assessment center, emotional intelligence, technical skills, leadership stuff, all kind of stuff. They screwed with us for a week. Organizational psychologists and all that stuff. Anyways, I scored third out of 143rd, and which surprised everybody. And they stuck me in about a 90-year-old plant in Pontiac, Michigan, and literally no training. Just put me out there, and I had a team of 55 people, and everybody on that team were UAW people, and they were at least 2 times older than me. So they put me with absolutely the worst plant, the worst productivity, the worst safety, and some of the most high seniority people who really didn't give a crap, because that's what everything is based on. So this is where I got the greatest learning lesson of my life, and I'll share this with you. So after getting my ass kicked a few times by these, not literally, but get my ass kicked by them screwing with me as a supervisor, I decided, there's got to be a better way. There has to be a better way. So I looked for commonality. So what I'm about to share with you is like the intuition that a good leader should get, right? So the first thing I did was look for commonality, and the place where I found commonality was in sports. The Tigers, the Lions. I taught football, I played football, played baseball, did all this stuff. And so I started to develop a rapport with some of these guys on my line. And I developed a rapport with the guy who was at the first position on the line. And we made these huge car doors and car hoods, big pressed metal presses, 250-pound presses. And when they come down, they can literally cut a body in half, right? And this is all you hear. It's like being outside of a plane. So we worked 14 hours a day. It was crazy. But the data on this line was that they never made their number and they never hit the quality metric. So I got to know the guy who ran the first thing, and he had a he had the highest seniority, and his job was taking this big slab of steel and sliding it through a roller. So he could go as fast as he wants and piss off everybody on the line, or he could go real slow and piss me off. So whenever he didn't get his way, he'd go real slow because the contract said he just has to be in motion. His name was Bill White. So one day I'm getting close to Bill White, and I'm walking through the cafeteria, and he says, I got a bet for you. I said, okay. He says, I'm going to bet you $100 that I can beat you in 10 games of checkers. And I thought to myself, there ain't no way. You know, here I am. I'm well-educated. I'm this, I'm that. I believe my own hype. So needless to say, we're in a cafeteria. The place is full. He kicks my ass. He takes and gets my $100. And then he says to me in front of everybody, what did you learn? And you know, every interview I've went on in my life, I've said this story. That's how important it is to me. He said, what did you learn? I said, I learned that I'm a street kid who got hustled by a checker champ. He said, well, besides that. I said, geez, Bill, I don't know. I'm just amazed. I just gave you $100. He says, you see that tie you got on? I go, yeah. He goes, that doesn't mean shit. I said, what's that have to do with checkers? He says, let me say it to you again. That tie you have on, that doesn't mean shit. Take that tie off and you're one of us. So just because you got this great education and you've made made a good thing out of your life, it doesn't mean anything. Because let me tell you something about us. We work in here for the benefits, and we have businesses on the outside. So it suddenly got to me that, okay, leadership is about listening for understanding. And this guy was good enough to teach me a lesson, have a little fun with me, you know, sort of slap me a little bit. And that whole tie incident leveled me off. It's like somebody who says, I went to Harvard. Okay, well, you know, so what? I went to a junior community school and I go run Facebook. I mean, so, you know, things like that. So I've learned that sort of humbleness is everything to do with leadership. And I use that in every interview. So from that point, I became best friends with this guy. And because of that, I showed him my playbook. I said, we need to run this many at this quality level. And he says, well, I'll make another deal with you. I said, well, no, here we go. Here we go again. He said, let me tell you this. If we can get this quality and at this number, can we go home early? I said, I don't know. So I went to my general foreman, who was a ex-Marine, real hardcore with the haircut and everything. And he said, Tony, I'm looking at the data. These guys have never, ever made that many doors, that many hoods with perfect quality. I said, well, if they do, will you let them go home? So he looks at me and says, man, they're really running a number on you. I said, well, will you do it? And he said, okay, they can't go home, but they can leave their jobs and go whatever they want to do on the premises. So I walk back into my office and I say to them, it's a deal. You just can't go home, but you can go anywhere. Starting the very next day, for the next 6 months, they hit that friggin' number every day. They hit perfect quality every day. And so what I did, another learning lesson for leaders, I got on the golf cart and I chased parts. So when something broke, I went and got it. I didn't call to get it. When I needed to find an electrician or a millwright or whatever, I went and got them. So the line never stopped. So my role became something different than what the foreman role was in the GM world. And what I did is I taught the people on the line statistical process control because I understood statistics. So when I taught them how to sample, for instance, 1 out of every 10, we dominated to a point where within a year I got promoted. And I got promoted to teach what I just did on that line across GM, across the world. And I had 8 UAW members, all significantly older than me, working for me. And we traveled the world to every location. True story. So that put me on the map. And very soon after that, I got recruited out of GM. GM, in their infinite wisdom again, they were going through a tough time and they decided to lay off all the engineers and MBAs. Instead of laying off the people that didn't have good skill sets, they were laying off the bench, the really up and comers. And they gave us around $40,000 or $50,000 to sign something saying we can never work at GM, and we left. All the GM, what's the name of that college in Michigan? GMI, I think it's called. Myself, all the MBAs, everybody left, and I got that money, which I bought my first house with, and I got promoted to Hewlett Packard. So what I had essentially done is create what's now called self-managed work teams. I literally had done that without even knowing the term. So I went to Hewlett Packard and I brought that technology to the white collar space. So if it could work on the floor, if it could work on the shop floor, why can't it work in the office? So we did it at Hewlett Packard. I ran the Northeast section of Hewlett Packard as an HR person, and slowly became an organizational change person for them. And then at that time, I was training for the World Games in powerlifting, and the president of Hewlett Packard at the time made a deal. He said, if you move out to California, you can work out here 2 days a week and you can train, because it was going to be in San Francisco. And you could teach us out there. And I'm like, I'm in. So I do that. I go out there for 3 months. I develop all kind of relationships. I see how West Coast business is done, which is completely different. And one thing led to another, and I go back. I do good in the World Games, and I come back. I was living in Boston at the time, and I say to my wife, hey, I got a call. Harley Davidson, a headhunter, called me and said, would you have a problem working next to someone with long hair, earrings, and tattoos? And this was an older guy in Chicago. I go, his name was Bill. I said, Bill, I guess I wouldn't have a problem. And he said, well, this guy by the name of John Campbell, he's the executive VP at Harley. He saw your work. He wants you to come there. He wants you to go interview. Harley's got to go through this massive turnaround, and they want you to be the guy. Now, I'm a hardcore biker. That's how I grew up. I mean, I'm tatted up big time, which I never tell anybody about, but I am. So to me, it was like, oh my gosh. So I walk into Harley like it's Christmas, and from day one, we start making a huge difference. Like at that time, some people on the call may know this, Harley was running this business on a supply and demand curve. So they figured that if they kept the supply low, they keep the demand really high, and they would run that out as long as they can, because they virtually didn't have any competition at that time. And so when that was going on, my first 3 weeks there, I visited the 3 locations in the United States, and it's about a 1,600-mile assembly line. Starts way up in Wisconsin, get all the fiberglass for one bike, gets on a truck and goes down to Milwaukee, where it picks up the engine and the transmission, and then goes to York, Pennsylvania, where they put it all together. Well, this was true just in time, because when that truck pulled up in York, Pennsylvania, if everything wasn't perfect, they took that bike off a line, and it went into what they call the Harley Hospital. Well, the Harley Hospital was a $64 million a year problem, and nobody could figure it out, because there's 3 different unions involved. And nobody had thought about, well, let's get the union guys together and talk shop. So 3 weeks into the job, all I could do is beg for forgiveness. I get up to, and you can picture me doing it, right? I get up to Tomahawk, I get that guy, I pick up Jerry Nackert, who ends up being one of my best friends, the best union leader in the world. I pick him up, we go to York, Pennsylvania, we sit down with some engineers, and in 3 hours, we solved the $64 million problem, which was all communication-based. So immediately my stock goes way up at Harley, and I just got there. And I realized at that point, I got some strength inside of me to recognize, to see issues before other people see them. And if I can inspire people by being their voice and allowing them to become innovative and having their back, and when I train special forces guys, it's all military talk, having your six or whatever, right? If I could do that, and I had the guts enough to withstand any attack by any engineering leader, anybody who didn't want to go along with the program, I'd have their back. I could really make some great things happen, and I could just step out of the way. So needless to say, that model just sort of hit the tipping point in Harley, where it overwhelmed all those 3 locations, and suddenly Harley started to dominate. I got some of that credit, and some of it wasn't mine, but the process was mine. And right at that moment, I realized I got something. I want to be a consultant. So I started to look at my resume, and I said, okay, I have to only work at blue chip companies, and I need to get this consulting business started while I'm working, so that I can use what I'm learning, use the Harley, Hewlett Packard names, which were huge brands, and that would get me into other companies. So one of the unique things we did because of what happened at Harley is that my department ran, they called it something, and I forget the term what it was, but we would invite other companies to come in and study us. And we would charge them $5,000 a piece. So we literally had hundreds and hundreds of companies coming in and meeting our people through my department. So I got to keep all that money, and that's how we ran my department. So it was zero money. So again, from a money standpoint, even though that was not my strength back then, we looked like we were, invincible. So once I left Harley, I started getting recruited by some of the big dogs. At that time was Jack Welch was the thing, and Jack Welch's people were trying to recruit me to go work there. And I finally ended up going to Allied Signal, which is now Honeywell, and doing this work that I told you about, this making it better process, which is a game changer. It's a dominator. I mean, it can't lose. And I started doing that, and then finally got to the point after some of those companies where I said, you know what, I'm ready to do this. I just need to get a big contract. And within weeks, I got BP. And BP had just gone through the oil spill, and they called me in. I don't know anything about that business. And I go and I help get involved in some of the biggest pieces of BP. And I bring the MIB process there. So what started off as like a $12,000 or $15,000 gig over a few days ended up to be multi-million-dollar contracts at BP. And that took me to Shell. I got to do it at Shell. And then it's just been going back and forth using that same process and redefining. This is the part that I talk to you about all the time, right? Is that what made me successful? Because I got to do it on myself first, right? And this is what pisses people off. But it should piss you off. It should piss off your brain. What made you successful in the past is not going to make you successful in the future. It just ain't going to do it. I mean, I taught, this is great. I don't know if you're a U.S. football fan or not, but
I am.
Okay. So I taught Bible study with some of the greatest football players. Reggie White, if you ever hear that name.
Oh, yeah.
And he was a legend. And we shared the importance of updating your skill set. So how did he become so good? Never lifted a weight in his life. So what did he do to be such a monster? Right? It was changing up every day, something. Every day. So I started again putting it all together, saying, okay, change is it. words have nothing to do with it. You know, like people say words are important. I don't buy it. It's all action. And so I start redefining leadership, redefining culture change, redefining performance. And the gig at BP allowed me to get Allied Barton in the game. So we had a huge problem. They had a huge safety problem. Allied Barton was the vendor. It was a huge, massive campus, thousands of people. And security there was outsourced to Allied Barton, but BP also had their security force. And the people on the BP security force hated the Allied Barton security force. Does this sound familiar, people listening? Because the company decided to outsource it because Allied Barton said they could do it cheaper, faster, better. So within a couple of weeks, I had to, there were 6 companies working for BP, and I had to, my goal was very simple. I had to bring the safety incidents down to 0, and I had to align each of these different companies that were into this hub of BP. I had to get them all on the same page as an external consultant. So no internal authority. And this process I tell you about, literally, we created the most powerful, honest conversations. And the security guy there, CJ, he just crawled on my backpack, and he's a big guy, he's a linebacker. He crawled my backpack. He says, I'm going to learn everything I ever wanted to know, aren't I? I go, yep, you are going to do it. This is going to put you on the map. You owe me. And we completely restructured, re-rolled, responsibility to the security people, so that they were part of the customer experience. They just weren't sitting at a gate checking stuff. So I got them involved in BP, the brand, BP, the customer experience, BP, the employee experience. Now suddenly they weren't just security. They weren't just outsourced, right? And I'm sure you can relate to some of this, because this has to be a feeling that people in your field, a feeling like we're not the equivalent of our customer, or whatever that is. I don't know what the right word is, but it was so apparent to me. The work I've done since then with Allied Barton, I see it all over the country, right? And so we basically took 6 corporate cultures and made one out of it. And we came up with a brand. It was called Be Amazing. So whenever anybody asked anybody what your job description is, it's Be Amazing. How simple is that? I don't want to get any more definitive, but it's Be Amazing. So everybody became Be Amazing, just like everybody at Harley Davidson has tattoos. Harley Davidson, Be Amazing is what we did there. And so I've taken that approach, my friend, and gone around the world and do what I do. And then after a long run doing that, I decided, I wonder if I can really do what I've been preaching. And so I have one love. Well, I have multiple things I like, but one love, and that's dogs. And I had this brainstorm of idea. There's lots of dog places around. It's a $70 billion business, the pet industry. I did my homework, put my MBA to use. And the funny part of it is, in this town, I built a pet hotel themed after a Ritz-Carlton. And I built it right in a Trump neighborhood. So everybody in that neighborhood had a lot of money, and they all had pets. So you'll never let me live this down. I bought a little van, and I had a little uniform, and I drove that van, and I looked like the milkman of old. And I would pull into the Trump neighborhood at 6 o'clock in the morning. I know you're laughing at me, so I know you are. It's okay.
I'm laughing with you, Tony.
You can laugh with me. So I got this little van, and it's got pictures of dogs on it. And I pull in these neighborhoods, and all the rich spouses, I won't just say women, but all the rich spouses at 6 o'clock in the morning would drop off their dog with me in the van. I'd have like 50 or 60 dogs back and forth. And we had about 150 dogs a day at $50 a piece for the day. You do the math, 7 days a week. And that was just daycare. Then boarding was something different. But the point was I became the brand. That little bus became the brand. You know, I didn't talk about my experience at Mattel, but Mattel, when I ran HR, they promoted me into marketing, and I got to run the Hot Wheels brand in NASCAR. So the one thing I noticed about NASCAR is that they have moving advertisements. The cars are an advertisement, right? And that's what made me think of this truck and getting it wrapped. Well, the end of that story is after 5 years, I sold that place for 10x. Okay, so I got to prove I could lead people, that I could love dogs, that was my why, and that I could sell it. And so then I sold it, and then life threw punches at me. I mean, I have 5 members of my family with cancer. So it's been now a grind. Now it's time to be resilient. Now it's time to dig in, get back to my roots of doing this sort of work with people like you, and helping you become the very best you could be, that you will never get from a typical leadership course or out of your companies, right? And I don't know, that's my story. That's the story of me, right or wrong. It is what it is to date. And there, as you noticed, there was many times where I got humbled along the way, and that's okay. You know, that's okay. I think that's probably one of the, I hate to admit it, but it's probably the best learning you get, is to get humbled. You know, I've got humbled in the ring. I've got humbled out of the ring. I've got humbled in business. So anyway, so that's where I'm at. And questions?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, the one thing I wanted to bring up, the point that you made about what's gotten us to the level of success that we're at, isn't sustainable. Like what got you, basically made me think of this book. I had it behind me. You know, what got you there, or what got you here won't get you there.
That's
right.
right.
Kind of the same principle.
That's right.
Right now, I'm looking at your client list here, and it's a pretty impressive list. Obviously, you've mentioned BP, British Petroleum, also Harley Davidson, NASCAR, the NFL, the NHL, Major League Baseball, IBM, New Era, Hewlett Packard, Mattel. So can you elaborate a little bit on the type of work that you do with these organizations?
Yeah, I can do it. So one of the jokes about the NHL, because I know you guys are big hockey fans, is that I taught some, and they'll never admit it, so I'm not going to bring up any names because they're too proud, but I literally got hired to teach them how to fight on the ice. And I'm not a skater. So here we are on that freaking cold, hard ice. And I'm teaching them. I'm on this thing, obviously not on skates. And I'm teaching them, and obviously they can't use their feet, right? Obviously. So I'm teaching them how to dominate. And these are big boys. I mean, these are big boys, but they get. So the NHL thing, I did some work for the league, but part of that is fun because whenever I see these guys, when I golf or anything, and I go back to Buffalo and in Nashville, there's a few of these guys that I've trained, and we joke about that. I say, I'm the fight consultant. It's kind of funny. So, what was your question? You got me excited.
Yeah, I could tell. Just a little bit of the work. If you could elaborate a little bit on the work that you do with these organizations.
So the work is this. It's twofold. The first fold is somebody comes to me and says, this is my pinch point. This is something that's significantly hurting us. I should say this. This is how they say it. This is something we think is hurting us, or they say, this is exactly what it is. So the message for me, whenever I hear either one of those things, is data, data, data. Data, data, data. You know, the squeaky wheel is not who I want to be talking to. I want to go get some intel. And so if you take a look at my my LinkedIn profile, my old boss at Mattel, he wrote about one of my strengths was how deep I get in the organization and build relationships, right? So even though my title may be way up here, I'm down with that guy who's sweeping the floor because he sees everything. So, and a pastor said that to me one time. He says, you're going to use your commonality to change the world. And so I've always held on to that sort of mission, vision, right? So, so I either go in and help fix a pinch point, what they think it is, or I tell them, I understand, give me a couple weeks to understand your business as well as you do. And for the most part, I do understand that before I get in there, I understand their business. I understand it at 60,000 feet, 20,000 feet. I just don't understand it on the ground floor yet. But I certainly understand it from a customer level. So when I go in, I got some assumptions going on in my head of what's going on and what I need to test. And then we just start collecting data. I mean, I don't make it a formal thing. I make it informal. I do it in groups. I do it one-on-one. The MIB process, the making it better process, if you want me to spend a couple minutes on that, that's such a kick-ass process because it's inclusive. And I've shared it with you, you know, so the 60-second version of this is what I do, is we go into an organization, we sit down with the executive team. And if it's a new leader, it's better because they don't have any skin in the game. And when I meet with them, I tell them all they can do is not say anything. I just want them to observe and listen. So we meet with that executive team and we create what they think is a beautiful statement of strategy. And after they get to flaunt over it and they pump their chest out because it's really great, I then say, okay, we got to do something. I want all of you, I want the head of marketing, the head of HR, the head of finance, head of security, I want you to take your whole organization 2 levels down and I want you to stack rank it. And they look at me. Yep, I want to see your A players, your B players, and your C players. And the exercise that we're going to do in front of everybody is you have to prove why somebody's an A player, B player, C player, and come up with this ratio that whatever the customer wants. So if it's 10% A players, who are your 10% A players? Who's your 50%? You know, that sort of thing. So what that process does, probably for the first time for a leader, is they have to really understand what their people do. Then they have to judge them. And then they have to draw lines. Then they have to verbally get up in front of this new leader and all their peers and say why they think somebody's number one. So let's say we do it in your group and you know, the head of marketing is up there and he says, yeah, Joey is my number one person, my go-to person, does this, 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 and this. And all of a sudden, the sales guy says, Joey sucks. Sales and marketing, and this is what happens, by the way, it's just like this. Sales and marketing are supposed to be married. Joey thinks that marketing is makes sales the stepchild, right? And then I start. And this is what my lane is. My lane is asking the right questions in the right order. So the minute I see an opening to expose something, I will ask question after question after question to get out the whole thing. So I got trained in how to bring the undiscussables to the table. Like, I just can't leave a meeting if that friggin' elephant is still on the table. I want to do it. But you think about all the meetings you've ever been in your life. You walked out of there and that stinky elephant was sitting on that table when you left, right? I mean, that's just a fact. So as we continue this process and we go all the way around the room and everybody goes through this, they look at me. The leader has now learned about every one of his direct reports. He learned so much. He learned in one day what would have taken him a year. He learned how they think, how they judge people, how they perform, how they rank people, how they communicate with their peers, who's being honest, who's bullshitting, whatever it is, right? So then I say, okay, now, gang, here's what we got to do. The new CEO here wants the top 8 people. So I'm going to facilitate you guys over the next day or however long it takes to get down from this 150, 200 people to 8. Well, that's some of the most powerful, tough discussions, right? I mean, you can feel the pain that guys are going through. And the new leader, while he's watching this, he sees the method to my madness, which is this. As soon as we get down to that 8, those 8 people are absolutely, and they're all different ranks, right? Even I did it in Toronto with Mattel in Toronto, and it involved the union, and that ended up being the best location in the whole world for Mattel. But what happens is those 8 people become the high performers in the organization, the most trusted people in the organization. So the people love them and the leaders love them. So when I know I have that, I can do just about anything. So I get those 8 people and I tell the leadership, those 8 people, let's give them a title. They're the internal board of directors. You guys report into them. Oh, Tony, I said, no, because they can't really say much because their leader has already agreed to this, right? So as you go through this process, the leaders now take their beautiful statement of strategy and they give it to this group of 8, and the 8 people piss all over it. They say, this is the most generic crap I've ever read. It doesn't mean anything. Take it back. And they rewrite it. They give it to the internal board of directors, who then take it out to the masses. So if you're chosen as one of the high potentials and you come from marketing, you take it out, but you go interview people from some other function, not marketing. So now what have we done? We've created 8 superstars who now are going to learn the business, the whole business. It's the best training you could ever get, right? This is the Harvard, Stanford education all in one. They learn what's really going on in the business. So they go out and they ask 4 questions actually. What do you think of what this senior team came up with? Then we get a little deeper. What would you suggest they start doing, stop doing, and continue doing? And they collect a whole bunch of stickies on all those things. The next day, after they're all done interviewing all these people, they come back into a room with me, and I have put on the walls different capabilities like leadership, creativity, communication, coordination, conflict management. And they take those stickies and they place them underneath those levels. I mean, those capabilities. And so what happens right in front of this team is an instant Pareto diagram. Have you seen a Pareto diagram?
Yes.
So Pareto diagram, you've seen it, okay. So for the people who are listening, all it does is visually gives you a picture right away where the problem is. So instead of spending any time or money trying to fix stuff that you think may be the problem, I'm going to give you undeniable visual proof that this is the problem. Then we take all that data, we talk about it, and we go back to the executive team. And this is the power of it all. In a one-day meeting, I sit with those in the internal board of directors in a circle. And the leadership of the facility has a U shape on the outside. They're not allowed to talk the whole day, and they listen to what these 8 people are saying that they heard. They can't say anything. They can walk around and read it. It's uncut. The new leader who just came in has now learned, his learning curve has been reduced 75%. He knows what every function's doing, where the problems are. He knows who the 8 people are that are going to help make this work. And after they share it, the new board leaves, and I sit down with the leadership team and I say, okay, guys and ladies, here's the truth. And they forget the new bosses in the room. They go through denial. They go through blaming. They go through crying, getting mad, avoidance. They go through everything. And all I do is I put the Pareto diagram in front of them and say, okay, you have a deliverable. You need to prepare yourself for a communication meeting with all of those 600 people out there to what you are committing to do as a leader to fix this shit. It's not whether it's true or not. It is true. Now we're going to test your strategic acumen. Now you got to go leverage those 8 people and help them communicate, because they are your tipping point. And net, the final result of that is, of course, the business, every metric in the business improves dramatically. It can't help it. I get the customers involved. We got the whole workforce involved. There's no place to hide. And yes, somebody's bound to ask me this question. Yes, some people opt out. They are unable to change who they are. They don't believe what that book is you just showed me. They're unwilling to do that. They're like, you know, I've used this once and I probably shouldn't have used it before, but you know, they're like slavery, you know, years ago. You know, the African Americans had one drinking fountain and we had another. White guys had one other drinking fountain. Pure bullshit. But both sides believed it, right? So we actually had people, managers, that believed they couldn't talk to a shop floor worker. In Canada was a perfect example. The office side was called the carpet and the back of the house was called cement. So when you came in, where do you work? I work in cement. Where do you work? I work in the carpet. So that was how contagious that terrible culture was. So this process, it wins every time. It can't lose. It can lose if you don't have a good person facilitating it with the tough questions and not getting intimidated by a leader who says, I don't want to hear that anymore. That's not how it is. You know, all that sort of stuff. But what I've learned over time is that if you show people the data, they're either gonna become stars or goats. And we're gonna give them a chance to not be a goat. And that's where I start. The second part of my business is all coaching. I got lots of people around the world I coach, and I coach them on what I think leadership is, not what the books say it is. And everything just stopped. The minute we've heard the word COVID, all that goes away. Even though everybody's trying to sell the same shit, all that goes away. So now there's a whole new leadership skill set that's going to make you and me relevant. The only way it's not going to make us relevant is if our boss doesn't press us to become relevant. If our bosses allow us to continue, we're going to continue, but we're going to have a false sense of security. I'm telling you. And so that's sort of how I roll with this stuff with leadership. And that's why it's so impactful. You know, it's not academic, although I can go talk with the best of them, but it is very pragmatic and very impactful.
All right. Well, for the purposes of our discussion, obviously it's going to be centered on leadership, and you kind of touched on it there. Can you give us your definition of leadership? What is it from your perspective?
Yeah. So let's do this first. Let's talk about some. I don't personally believe there is a definition of words. So let me just go at it a different way, and you come up with it, what it means for you, right?
Okay.
So these are my core beliefs. First of all, I look at every organization as a living organism. It's alive. It's all systemic. It's not just security. If I touch security, it could impact marketing and vice versa, right? So I go in with that sort of mindset. I also go in with the mindset that post-COVID is all about rapid, frequent changes. Rapid, frequent changes. Sort of going between stable and dynamic, stable and dynamic, stable and dynamic. And that's going to create a set of competencies that we need to develop in leaders, right? So it's I shared this today with this group. It's a balancing act between sort of anarchy and a real strict structure, right? And you're somewhere along there, depending on your situation, depending on what's happening. You know, there's a special forces guy that I trained, and he shared this with me, and I use this. He said there's 3 distinct pieces of being a successful special forces person, right? So now why I'm using this is the organization of the future, of now, has to become agile. And there's a whole set of leadership approaches that go with being agile. So agile means being fast, being flexible, using a lot more subject matter experts to go on a mission. Whatever the mission is, you design it for your company, right? Whatever it is every day. But your job as a leader is to know the SMEs in this case, is to know who you have on the bench for that mission that you have some intel on, right? And it's for you as a leader to say, okay, Tony, you're up. Jerry, you're up. Mary, you're up. You guys are up. Boom. This is your mission. You got 3 days to do this, and then you're down, and then you're back to doing some other work. That's what the leader of the future is going to be. So fast, flexible teams. So that makes people, you know, and that's not to take anything away from a generalist skill set, because you should have a generalist mentality, but you need to sort of be best in class at something in order to make one of these teams, right? So the leader of the future has a toolkit, and in that toolkit are questions. So the leader of a, and this is how I lead, right? So I just use an example. I always use questions as my #1 tool. That's what I pull out. I don't pull out anything else. I pull out a pad, paper, and I'm asking questions. And a lot of the process of inquiry stuff I do ahead of time, just like I did with you. How do I prepare for this, right? I'm prepared for this so that we get the most out of it. So I use questions for 2 reasons. First of all, when I ask them, I learn from them. It gives me more about what's going on in that battlefield, right? I learn from them. And the second thing is, it allows me to give guidance. It allows me to use my experience base, my leadership base, my life experiences, whatever it is, to give guidance. Not directions, but guidance, right? And thirdly, it allows me to learn from others. So questions are in that toolbox. The second thing in that toolbox for the new leader is an immense ability to listen for understanding. Okay, so how do you do that? This is how I do it. I'm not telling everybody to do that, but people who work for me, I very rarely, unless we have a meeting called, I very rarely show up on any set schedule. I show up, right? Leadership just shows up, and I'll tell you why afterwards. But I'll always walk. If you worked for me, you would see me come out of the blue. I got my book. I got questions. They're not about your business. They're like, hey, man, how are you doing? What's going on with your daughter? No. It's developing a rapport. It's me understanding and you understanding, right? So I'm building this credibility with you. And then I'm getting questions from you that you need some answers to, right? Questions you normally would not ask your boss, but you're asking them, and I'm writing them, which shows that I care. And this is one of the skills of being empathy bound as a new leader. I'm writing it down. I'm walking in. I'm not planning it. I'm not giving you time to come up with some perfect response out of the Bible. Here it is, right? So I'm learning to listen for understanding. And here's the other piece of it. When I do that, I then follow up with you, which builds trust. So even though I'm not going to come back with the answer you want sometimes, it's not a no. It's like, okay, I thought this over. I went and talked to the CEO about it or anybody about it, and here's the rationale for their decision. We may not like it. It's going to cost them. It's going to cost them adversity. This is very important right here. We may not like it, and we're going to live in some adversity. And guess what? We're jumping into the adversity. We're going to work inside the adversity. It's going to make us better. So I don't even give people time to get on the drama triangle, as I call it. I don't give them time to be a victim. You know what? I've been in that foxhole. I've been in that street fight. I've been in that ring with people that outweigh me. I've been in there with the best fighters in the world, right? We're in there with the best fighters in the world. And you know what? They're going to feel it. When I'm doing my job, they're going to feel me, right? So when I work with somebody, they feel learning. They don't feel like I'm taking notes to screw them down the road.
Yeah.
They feel like we are solving real issues and real learnings going on. And what that does, and this is where it's really important, being humble is by far the greatest gift a leader could have in the new world. And there's a rationale for that, right? So here's the myth on being humble. And by the way, stop me at any time because this stuff is just etched in my mind. This is how passionate I am about it.
Yeah.
And I'll shut up. But being humble is so important because when I'm humble, I have no excuses. I am just me. I am just me, right? So humble people are inspiring people. If I'm going to lead in the new world, which has unpredictability in it, which has fear in it, which has all this stuff, I don't need to be a type A, rah-rah sales guy, right? Who I see right through. I'm not friggin' Tony Robbins. I don't buy it. I know he's my friend. I think it's bullshit, right? But he made millions. I can't fault it. It's his deal, and people want to believe it, let them believe it, right? But at the end of the day, that doesn't inspire me. I'm trying to inspire winners. If I did this right, if I staffed my team right, I got special war guys. I got the best of the best people on my team. When I have to stack rank them, I'm going into my boss and saying, I got 7A players, boss. Let's hear what everybody else has to say because I got a write-up on every one of them, what they've done above and beyond, above and beyond, above and beyond. I'm more than happy to do that. But they can't be that good if I don't manage them that way, if I don't lead them that way. So this being humble opens the door for learning. And that's it. But here's the myth. This is what you're going to run into. There will be people who are incapable of being humble because they think it's a weakness. Right? They think it's a weakness. And so I can tell you this much. I have been with, literally, I know I've been with the toughest people in the world. I know. I've been with, and as a bodyguard, I've seen some of the biggest loudmouth, blah, 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 get knocked down and cry to their mommies, right? I've seen it, right? But I've seen some of the most calm, cool, collected, humble people, total wide vision. Their freaking pulse rates are like 50 or some crazy low number. And they are humble leaders and they're powerful, right? Yeah. That's what we're trying to create. How do we create that? I mean, we create it by walking that behavior. We do it. We stick up for people with data. We don't engage. So all these, obviously I'm painting a picture of the perfect person, which is impossible, right? Because we have home lives and we have other things.
Of course.
But, you know, at the end of the day, that whole zero-sum myth of someone isn't, that they're weak, That's the guy or the woman you put your arm around and say, listen, I'm going to talk to you. I need to sit down with you. We need to find out what your why is, right? You read some assignment stuff. And I just talked about this on a video the other day. This is what you should do with every one of your employees. People have to know, you need to know, first off, what defines you. If what defines you is that you're a captain in the security force, that can go away tomorrow. You could be demoted, whatever. If what defines you is how you got there or how you do something better than anybody, that could go away. But if you understand what it is, why you do what you do, right? Tomorrow you can get out of, if someday you just get sick of security and say, you know what, to your wife, I'm walking away from it. What? Our house, our bill. No, you know what? I know who I am. I can go with these same skill sets that I learned and take it over into this thing. That's what I did. I worked in various functions. I led in all these different functions so that I could learn it. Not one of them was better than the other, but together, I got a completely different view of the world. So when someone signs a coaching contract with me, like I hope somebody on this call does, maybe a group of you guys, I'm giving you information that comes from so many experiences and not out of a book. So, so what is leadership? You know, it's about being the change, number one. It's about being actively engaged in yourself, in your team, in your processes. Very important. It's much more than an intention. I can't stress that enough. You hear that people talking about all this intention stuff. It's much more than an intention. Okay, and here's what it is. If someone says to me, what is the leader of post-COVID really doing? Besides what I said, they look at problems from all angles. So they're never, ever knocked on tilt. They're not knocked on tilt. Here's the truth of the matter. I've worked with companies that we've gone through this process I just talked about. I work with their leaders, and when COVID hit, it had very little impact on their business. So how can it have such major impact on some industries, and then some other industry that solves right next door has very little impact? I'm not even going to say. But what the point I'm trying to make is that black swan events, which this is, we can never predict when they're going to happen. That's why they're black swan events. But we can do what I just said as leaders. So when it comes, whatever it is, we got a fast speed team that's flexible, that has the right skill sets, and we can throw it at it in a second and achieve what we have to achieve, one after another.
And we'll wrap up the first of this two-part series. Join us for the next episode where Tony finishes with his final thoughts on leadership. Until next time, stay safe and take care.